Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now. John McEnroe has sparked debate by criticizing Carlos Alcaraz's tactical approach in the Australian Open final, despite the Spaniard's historic four-set victory over Novak Djokovic. The American legend believes Alcaraz made a critical mistake by not implementing his winning strategy from the very first point, suggesting the 22-year-old got lucky that Djokovic couldn't maintain his opening set level throughout the match. In this video, we're examining McEnroe's exact critique. What changed after that brutal first set? Whether the criticism is fair given Alcaraz's 5.5-hour semi-final battle against Zverev, and what this reveals about the fine margins between championship tennis and championship strategy. Let's paint the picture of what actually went down in Melbourne on Sunday, because context matters when you're talking about tactical mistakes at the highest level of tennis. Carlos Alcaraz walked onto Rod Laver Arena chasing history, 7 Grand Slam titles at 22 years old, a chance to complete the career Grand Slam faster than anyone in the Open era. Standing across the net, Novak Djokovic, 37 years old, holder of 24 major titles, winner of 10 Australian Open crowns, and a man who had never, not once, lost a final in Melbourne. The first set was brutal. Djokovic came out absolutely firing, and Alcaraz looked off. The Spaniard seemed tentative, reactive rather than proactive, and Djokovic dismantled him 6-2 in just 38 minutes. It wasn't close. It wasn't competitive. Djokovic was controlling the pace, dictating with his forehand, and making Alcaraz chase shadows around the court. At that moment, you had to wonder, is the occasion getting to the 22-year-old? Is Djokovic about to deliver one final masterclass and secure that elusive 25th major? But then something shifted. Alcaraz came out for the second set with completely different energy. He was more aggressive, taking the ball earlier, stepping inside the baseline, going after his shots. The passive, reactive tennis from set 1 disappeared, replaced by the dynamic, attacking style that's made him one of the most exciting players on tour. He won the second set 6-2, then took the third 6-3. Djokovic fought back in the fourth, but Alcaraz closed it out 7-5, winning the last 3 games when it mattered most. History made. Career Grand Slam complete. Youngest man ever to do it. Cue the celebrations, right? Well, yes. But also, cue John McEnroe with some pointed observations about how it all went down. Speaking on ESPN immediately after the match, McEnroe praised Alcaraz for the courage and power he displayed to close out the victory. But then, he added something that's had people talking ever since. McEnroe said, and these were his exact words, "I think that was actually the type of match he should have played in the beginning." Hold on. Let that sink in for a second. McEnroe just watched Alcaraz make history, achieve something only 8 other men in the Open era have ever accomplished, and his immediate reaction was essentially, "Yeah, but he should have done it differently." McEnroe continued, offering a possible explanation for why Alcaraz started so poorly. Maybe he was affected by that 5.5-hour match in the heat, and he wasn't able to execute that. But as his body loosened up, he started to do his thing, and obviously, in the end, it paid huge dividends. Now, before we get into whether McEnroe's criticism is fair, let's talk about what he's actually saying here. He's not questioning Alcaraz's talent. He's not saying the achievement is diminished. What he's pointing out is a tactical mistake, that Alcaraz had the right game plan, but he didn't implement it from ball 1. And in McEnroe's view, that's a problem. Because against a player like Djokovic, you can't afford to gift him a set while you're figuring things out. You might not get the chance to come back. Patrick McEnroe, who was commentating alongside his brother John, jumped in with his own take, and it was more complimentary. He praised Alcaraz's tactical awareness and gave credit to his team for making the necessary adjustments. Patrick said, "His tactical awareness, I think, is outstanding. You've got to give him and his team credit for that. We know about the shot-making ability. We know about the pure talent. We saw his grit, his determination in that struggle against Zverev with the heat, with the cramps, but I think we saw some really high tennis IQ. So you've got both perspectives right there in the commentary booth. Patrick sees the adjustment as evidence of intelligence and coaching excellence. John sees it as evidence that Alcaraz left something on the table by not starting with that approach. The thing is, they're both kind of right, and that's what makes this so interesting. Let's talk about what John McEnroe is really getting at here. In his playing days, McEnroe was famous for his tactical acumen. The guy could read a match like nobody else. He understood patterns, he saw weaknesses, and he exploited them ruthlessly. When he says Alcaraz should have played differently from the start, he's coming from a place of genuine expertise. He's seen this movie before. He knows what happens when you let a player like Djokovic or Borg or Lendl in his era get comfortable and find their rhythm. They make you pay. McEnroe's implicit argument seems to be this: if you know the game plan that works, why wait until you're down a set to implement it? That first set against Djokovic was 38 minutes of essentially handing the Serbian free confidence, free momentum, free belief that he could win this match. And Djokovic is exactly the type of player who will capitalize on that. If he'd maintained that level throughout the entire match, Alcaraz might not have had the chance to mount a comeback. There's also this. McEnroe suggested that Alcaraz was a little lucky that Djokovic was not able to maintain that incredible level throughout the match. That's a spicy take. It implies that Djokovic's fade was less about Alcaraz forcing him into errors and more about the 37-year-old's tank running empty after his brutal 5-set semifinal against Jannik Sinner just 2 days earlier. And you know what? There's probably some truth to that. Djokovic looked exceptional in that first set. The forehand was penetrating, the serve was clicking, the movement was sharp. But as the match wore on, you could see the cumulative fatigue setting in. His first serve percentage dropped. He started missing routine shots he'd been making in set 1. His legs weren't quite as fresh on the big points. That 5-setter against Sinner, where he saved a match point in the 3rd set tiebreak, clearly took something out of him. So McEnroe's point is valid. If Djokovic had been able to sustain that first set level, Alcaraz's slow start might have been fatal. The fact that it wasn't fatal doesn't mean it wasn't a mistake. Now let's flip this around and look at it from Alcaraz's perspective, because there's context here that matters. The kid had just played a 5-hour, 27-minute semifinal against Alexander Zverev 2 days earlier. Not just any 5-hour match, the longest semifinal in Australian Open history. He was up 2-0, nearly closed it out in straight sets. Then Zverev fought back. Alcaraz cramped up badly in the 3rd set, needed a controversial medical timeout, could barely move for stretches of the match, and somehow still found a way to win in 5 sets. Think about what that does to your body at 22 years old. The physical toll is obvious: the legs, the stamina, the recovery time. But there's also the mental and emotional exhaustion. You're riding this incredible high of having battled through one of the toughest matches of your life, and now you've got 48 hours to recover and prepare for the biggest final of your career against the greatest defensive player in tennis history. McEnroe acknowledged this possibility when he said Alcaraz maybe was affected by that 5.5-hour match in the heat. That's not a throwaway line. It's a legitimate factor. When your body is still recovering, sometimes you can't execute the game plan you want to execute, even if mentally you know what you should be doing. Your legs don't push off the way they should. Your timing is slightly off. You're a half step slower than usual, and against Djokovic, that's all it takes. So maybe, just maybe, Alcaraz wasn't making a tactical mistake so much as dealing with physical limitations that sorted themselves out as the match progressed and his body loosened up. That would explain why the transformation happened so dramatically between sets 1 and 2. It wasn't necessarily that he figured something out tactically, it was that his body started responding the way he needed it to. But here's where McEnroe's criticism still has bite. Professional tennis at the Grand Slam level demands that you find a way regardless of the circumstances. Everyone's dealing with something. Djokovic was dealing with his own brutal five-setter just 2 days earlier. He's also 37 years old, which means his recovery time is significantly longer than Alcaraz's. If anything, the physical advantage should have belonged to the 22-year-old, not the guy pushing 40. What makes this debate so fascinating is that we're arguing about a match Alcaraz won. He made history. He completed the career Grand Slam at an age when most players are still trying to win their first major. The result speaks for itself. And yet, McEnroe's point lingers. What if Djokovic had maintained his level? What if that first set game plan from Alcaraz had cost him the match? This gets at something fundamental about how we evaluate performance in sports. Do we judge based purely on results, or do we factor in the process? In results-based thinking, Alcaraz's approach was perfect because he won. In process-based thinking, Alcaraz made a mistake that happened to not be punished because his opponent faded. McEnroe is clearly in the process camp. He's looking at the chess match within the match, and he's saying Alcaraz left himself vulnerable unnecessarily. There's another angle worth considering here. McEnroe has always been an advocate for aggressive, attacking tennis. He hated defensive grinding. He believed in taking the initiative, dictating play, putting pressure on your opponent from the first ball. That's how he played. That's the tennis he respects. So when he watches Alcaraz play passively and reactively in the first set, only to flip the script and play aggressively in the next 3 sets, his reaction is, "Why didn't you do that the whole time?" It's a fair question. Alcaraz, at his best, is an aggressive, dynamic player. He takes the ball early. He goes for his shots. He uses his incredible speed and anticipation to turn defense into offense. That's the Carlos Alcaraz who has won 7 Grand Slams. The version that showed up in the first set, hanging back, letting Djokovic dictate, playing defensively, that's not championship-level Alcaraz. That's a diminished version. Patrick McEnroe's counterpoint, that recognizing the problem and fixing it mid-match shows high tennis IQ, is also valid. Not every player can make that adjustment in real time in a Grand Slam final. Some players would have kept doing the same thing that wasn't working, stubbornly believing they could make it work. Alcaraz and his team identified the issue, made the adjustment, and executed it brilliantly for 3 straight sets. That's impressive in its own right. You could also argue that Alcaraz needed that first set to figure out the conditions, the ball, the way Djokovic was playing that day. Every match is different. Every court plays slightly differently depending on weather and time of day. Maybe Alcaraz needed those 38 minutes to gather information, process it, and respond accordingly. If that's the case, losing the first set was the price of education, and he paid it willingly because he knew he'd have chances to win it back. But McEnroe would probably say, that's an expensive education. Against a player like Djokovic, you might not get the chance to apply what you learned because he'll close you out before you can adjust. The fact that Djokovic's level dropped in sets 2 through 4 was fortunate for Alcaraz. It created the space for that adjustment to matter. Let's also talk about what happened during the match that adds context to all of this. Between losing the first set and coming out for the second, Alcaraz had a conversation with McEnroe courtside. And according to John, Alcaraz was completely relaxed about the situation. This is a kid who just got destroyed 6-2 in the first set of the Australian Open final, and he's cracking jokes with the commentators. That tells you something about his mentality. McEnroe mentioned this in his post-match commentary, noting that Alcaraz came over to chat about 3 times during the final, just as he had done in his previous matches. Even down a set, he maintained that carefree attitude that's become his trademark. Some people might see that as concerning. Shouldn't you be more focused, more intense when you're down a set in a Grand Slam final? But maybe that relaxed demeanor is exactly what allowed Alcaraz to reset mentally and come out firing in the second set. There's no one right way to handle pressure. Djokovic gets intensely focused and serious. Nadal gets into his rituals and superstitions. Federer maintained an almost supernatural calm. Alcaraz stays loose and light. All of them have won multiple majors, so clearly different approaches can work. But McEnroe's point about the tactics remains separate from the mental approach. You can be relaxed mentally while still being aggressive tactically. Looking at the bigger picture, this debate touches on something interesting about Alcaraz's development as a player. At 22 years old with 7 Grand Slams, he's obviously doing something right. But is there room for improvement? Absolutely. And maybe that's what McEnroe is really getting at. The talent is undeniable. The results are spectacular. But the tactical consistency, starting matches with the right game plan rather than figuring it out after a set, that's an area where Alcaraz can still grow. Think about the all-time greats. They didn't just have the shots. They had the tactical discipline to execute the right game plan from ball one, match after match, round after round. They didn't give their opponents free sets while they figured things out. They came prepared, they stuck to what worked, and they adjusted only when necessary. That's the level of consistency that separates good from great from legendary. If Alcaraz can combine his incredible natural talent with more tactical consistency, not needing that first set wake-up call to play his best tennis, he could be even more dominant than he already is. And at 22 years old, with 7 majors already in the bag, the ceiling is terrifyingly high. McEnroe also made some interesting comments about the future of men's tennis in the wake of this final. Both he and Patrick discussed whether anyone besides Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner would break through to win majors in the near future. Patrick flat out said, "Right now, there is no one else." John agreed, but added that we should be grateful Alcaraz and Sinner have stepped into the void left by the big three and kept interest levels high. That's the context in which McEnroe's criticism exists. He's not trying to tear Alcaraz down. He's holding him to the highest possible standard because he believes Alcaraz is capable of meeting it. When you're in the conversation about all-time greats, and with 7 majors at 22, Alcaraz absolutely is. The bar gets set impossibly high. Every decision gets scrutinized. Every tactical choice gets debated. Here's the thing about John McEnroe. The man has earned the right to have these opinions. 7 Grand Slam titles of his own. One of the most brilliant tactical minds in tennis history. A commentator who's been watching and analyzing the sport at the highest level for decades. When he says something, people listen, even if they disagree. And people will disagree. Some will say McEnroe is being unnecessarily critical of a 22-year-old who just made history. Others will say he's spot on, and that Alcaraz got a bit lucky, that Djokovic couldn't maintain his level. Both perspectives have merit. That's what makes this such a rich topic for discussion. The beauty of sports is that we get to have these debates. We get to analyze and dissect and argue about what happened and what should have happened and what could have happened. And the fact that we're having this debate about a match Alcaraz won, not lost, speaks to both McEnroe's high standards and Alcaraz's incredible achievement. Because at the end of the day, Carlos Alcaraz is the youngest man in history to complete the career Grand Slam. He's won all 4 majors by age 22. He's got 7 Grand Slam titles, and he's not even close to his prime yet. Whether he made a tactical mistake in the first set or not, whether he got lucky with Djokovic's fade or not, whether he should have come out more aggressive from the start or not, none of that changes the result. None of that diminishes the achievement. But McEnroe's criticism does add an interesting footnote to the story. It suggests that even in victory, even in making history, there are lessons to be learned and improvements to be made. And if Alcaraz can take that lesson, start strong, implement the right game plan from the first point, don't give your opponent free confidence, and apply it going forward, the tennis world better watch out. Because a Carlos Alcaraz who plays at his best level from the very first ball of every match, that's a player who might just rewrite every record in the book.